Okay, good evening, everyone. We'll call this regular council meeting of April 19th to order. First of all, under presentations, we have none this evening. Could I have a motion, please, to adopt the agenda as presented? Thank you. Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor, should I say Travis, to get it over with? How about Councillor Frank? Councillor Frank, thank you. Any further questions or comments? If not, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Next, could I have a motion, please, to accept the minutes of the council meeting held on April 5th?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vroba, seconded by Councillor Cernick. Any further questions, comments? If not, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Under original communications, delegations, and petitions, we have the Estevan Art Gallery and Museum over funding. So we have Amber Anderson, and we understand we have your associate, Amber?
Yes.
Catherine Gillis, yes. Okay, thank you both for coming this evening, and take it away.
So I don't know if you want me just to start, Catherine. Basically, we were just informed when we originally had met in the third week of January, I believe it was. I think when we were first meeting, it was more an understanding when we were talking about a budget. We were talking more about what we had done during COVID-19 and what we were doing for programming as a general introduction to the new council. And then I think there was a later date where the other third-party grantors met. I think it was March 17th. And I think that discussion turned more into a budget delegation was my understanding. So we just wanted to come tonight, and if there was questions that were more along the lines of what the other third-party grantors got, we just wanted to make sure that we had that process.
Okay, thank you for that. So have you got questions for us, or Councillor Clark, would you like to lead it off?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I guess I would just like to lead the questioning a bit as to some of the grants that you've been able to get, and some that you're trying to get, and where you're at this moment with some of the COVID type grants and others. Thank you.
Yes, so we actually have applied for the small business recovery. We have applied for VQs. We have applied for, there was an SRR, which was like for a reimbursement for anything you had to put into your building in regards to alterations for COVID-19 for reopening. And we've also applied for, it was a one-time ask, and that was for the museums association. It's called MAP funding, and that was a one-time ask, and we had applied for that last year as well.
Okay, so with those, go ahead, Councillor Walliser, please. I see your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I know the letter that Catherine had addressed to Council really was concerned about transparency in the process used, how exactly we came up with these dollar values that we sent out to the groups. And it really was based on the information that you did provide us in October during the budget process, as well as the update that you gave us when you did come in January. So some of the key numbers that I had pulled from those previous conversations looked at things like your wages, knowing that when I went to the calculator online, you could kind of guesstimate what you would qualify for through that program. And then another number that I looked at was the capital repairs to the Northwest Mounted Police Building, which I see you guys have received some funding for, and is still an ongoing conversation that Councillor Clark is working on with you, as well as another group in the community. And the other number that I looked at was your fundraising total, because I had read that your group really focuses on creating experiences for the community as a way of raising funds as well. And we knew that that likely wasn't going to be the same this year. So even though your budget showed that you would earn about $10,000 in fundraising, it was going to take you about $6,700 to get there, which only means that you needed to self-generate about $3,500, which I knew through a conversation with Councillor Clark was probably a pretty reasonable goal based on some of the ideas that your group has had this year. So we didn't just pick a number, we used the information that you had already presented to us. So just to kind of let you know what we were thinking as we went through that process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Walliser. Any comments, Catherine or Amber, on that?
If I may, I certainly I appreciate those comments. I know some of what we're looking for is clarity on it, but I think it's important, and I hope that it was communicated properly in the letter, and I think Ms. Blazer has provided some further context for us. But certainly, it was our understanding in talking with Councillor Clark that the conversations didn't appear in this last sort of update to be equitable in terms of the information that was sought, and so that was our immediate concern was certainly the process and the appropriate, transparent, and due process that each third party got. Because I'm sure as everyone can appreciate that obviously if we're asking questions of apples and questions of oranges, we're not necessarily getting the same result. And so that was our immediate concern. So we certainly appreciate taking the time and letting Amber provide sort of further context today. But I certainly, Councillor Walliser's explanation there is certainly a little bit further helpful to us in understanding what all went into the decision-making process. So I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments go ahead, Councillor Frank.
Sure. Sorry, Amber, I just wanted to just really quickly, the information here we were provided from Councillor Clark earlier today, just on some of the grants that you'd mentioned there that you'd applied for. Those ones you just applied for or you've received? Just curious to know which ones. Just so
we have received all of them except for the Saskatchewan recovery, which is just a 50% back of any bills that you had submitted. So we just basically had one large plexiglass piece. So the max that I would be getting from that particular grant would be $350.
Okay, thank you, Amber. Councillor Clark.
Since you've kind of had an idea now where the grants that are coming in and with the cut that the council did to your grant, are there any things that you're not going to be able to provide that you had hoped to provide during this year?
The trick with this is with the money that we get, that traditional 123.2 that we ask from the city is to cover off the wages. But then the other chunk of that is to cover off utilities for the building. So in effect, with getting cut the 23,200, it's having to basically fundraise for those utilities.
Okay, any other questions or comments from council? Amber, Catherine, anything else you'd like to add?
I think that covers everything, and I just do thank you all for having us in this evening and for giving us some insight into the process. I do appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, ladies, for appearing this evening. Councillor Clark, you had comments? Yeah.
Thanks, Your Worship. Could you also use this as a chance to promote your fundraiser coming up? I know you're doing a lot of work with it, and I think this is a good chance to let everybody know what you're up to.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Yes, we are doing a Mother's Day contactless charcuterie board fundraiser. So we are working with Southern Plains Co-op, so you can get a charcuterie box for $50. We're also working with an artist who is local, and she has handcrafted some stainless ceramic glassware for us. That's an additional $20 a glass. So we're trying to work and support artists as well. And then we also have one as an addition there's two different selections for white and red, $20 or $25 for the two different selections. So proceeds from that will go towards some of these funds that we're trying to make up.
Okay, so thank you, ladies, both for the excellent work that you do. Oh, we have another comment. Go ahead, Councillor Frank.
Sorry, so I did just want to clarify one more. So just, you did receive the $13,000 from the SUS and the $37,000 for the MAP program, right? To go for your operations, correct? Okay, so that'd be an extra $50,000 that you've gotten this year just to help with operations too, just to make sure that that's clear.
Yeah, so just to add to Councillor Frank, so you ladies don't feel at this point in time that you're short, right? Anybody?
Right now, as it stands, we're okay.
Okay. Okay, appreciate that. And again, thank you both for the work that you do. Councillor Walliser, you had a final comment?
Just a word of reassurance that that SUS program has been extended to September, so that will further help support the museum moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Walliser. Any other comments? If not, thanks again, ladies, this evening for giving us your input and feedback. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah, good night. Okay, moving forward under original communications, delegations, and petitions. We have a presentation from CAPP, Kelly McTaggart, current oil industry update. Good evening, Kelly.
Hey everyone, I'm just going to share my screen if that's all right. I'm going to have a host who's ever controlling this just give me the ability to do that.
Okay. City manager, who's very computer savvy, has taken care of that for you.
Perfect. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, well, I'll just jump right into it. I know that typically delegations are, about 10 to 15 minutes, so I will try and move through this as quickly as possible. But given I did present to the Chamber of Commerce last week, I did want to give you the full picture of what I presented on. But as I said, I'll move through it quickly, and then if there's any follow-up questions, please stay in touch. I'm happy to answer any questions, following this presentation. It doesn't have to be today. So very quickly, I work in Western Canada in an external communications role. I was previously working more in the operations side of things and communicating on technical files. But this year I'm doing quite a lot of work in Saskatchewan to just, raise some awareness as to where the industry is at within, the Canadian and global perspective, but also how things are moving along in provincial jurisdictions. So that being said, for those of you who aren't familiar with CAP, we are the largest industry association in Canada, and we represent large and small producer member companies. We also have a number of associate members who provide services to the oil and gas sector. And our members combined produce about 80% of Canada's natural gas and crude oil at any given time, depending where the fluctuations with the membership are. So the vast majority of the product that we develop in Canada is through our membership. So I'm going to do a couple of things today. I'm just going to give an overview of where the energy demand is at, especially in the context of COVID-19 and the current economic conditions that will, help support and lead to economic recovery. So getting right into things, I always like to start with this infographic, and this represents the global changes in the global energy mix from 2019 to 2040. And one of the reasons why we use this timeline, which is based on the International Energy Agency's forecasting, is because this is the timeline that we look at for the predominant targets to be hit for the Paris Climate Agreement. So if we are to meet those targets from a global perspective, this is what the energy mix is forecast to look like right now. And we do update this every year, so this is the most current. But where I always like to draw attention to first is this green column in the middle, so the other renewables, which is inclusive of all renewable energy products. And it actually increases about 400% over the course of these 20 years. So, the thing that I'm trying to highlight here is that we are by no ways outpacing other sources of energy with renewables. I think it's important to be very clear about the fact too that they are extremely important to the global energy mix. We need them to subsidize other energy forms, to move things away from coal and other energy intensive hydrocarbons. But that being said, we are not seeing, the global population move away from oil and natural gas, whereas we are seeing a decline in coal development. So, prior to the pandemic, the global demand for natural gas and oil grew continuously for about 20 years. Worldwide energy demand is expected to rebound in the post-pandemic period, with global highs of energy demand being seen as early as 2023. So once we see the implementation of vaccines and global economies opening up again, the increase of energy demand is going to be rapid. So just a little bit of context here. I don't usually include these in my presentation, but I have been lately because I think it's important to, to provide some everyday use in context of, what the oil and gas sector contributes. So, our sector's products are important to many parts of our daily lives, but especially during this health crisis the past year and a half. And the N95 mask is one of these, as well as hand sanitizer solutions and other medical equipment like IV bags, syringes, and gloves. These are all manufactured from petrochemicals that are derived from oil and gas feedstocks. So another example of this is that the petroleum derivatives in soap are also vital to enabling, germs and whatnot to come off of our skin. So I just wanted to add that because it's an interesting kind of side note to this. The only product that is not made from a petrochemical in the N95 mask is actually the nose clip, which is of course made from aluminum. So going back to kind of the global energy demand, we're still seeing major population increases in China and India. We're actually not expecting to see a stabilization of their populations until about 2050. And so as they move into kind of a more urban space as developing countries, there's a few things that happened. In addition to just having more people, we're also seeing increased utility use and more intensive energy demands from transportation. And these are the types of things that are creating pretty major energy demands globally. So China and India, their demands are in a day are more than what the Canadian market actually produces in a day. So for, just to give an idea of what the market potential is, it's massive. And so I did want to point out that, currently there are over 360 coal plants under construction globally, and most of which are in China and India. And for those of you who are familiar with, power numbers, this represents about 200 gigawatts of power generation. And so if these plants had been fueled by Canadian natural gas, the life cycle GHG emissions would be about 600 to 1,000 megatons per year lower. And to put that into perspective, this is more energy than Canada consumes in a year. So our potential for lowering global GHGs is exponential, and I think it's very important to make that point, because climate change does not have borders, contrary to what we might think, and so we all have a role to play in contributing to that, and there's an economic story to that as well. So the oil and gas sector in Canada is the largest single private investor in Canada, and we're also the single largest private investor in clean tech in the country. In 2019, the energy sector contributed about 5.7% to the GDP, and our exports totaled over $7 billion. And as we kind of look at the GDP to debt ratio in the country, which has increased to about 24%, where we need to look is really to this export space, and that's how we're going to bring that GDP to debt ratio down. And there's a big market argument to be made for oil and gas exports. Here are the Saskatchewan numbers. So you can see that in the province, the industry employs over 30,000 people. And this has actually come down over the course of the past decade, which is something I wanted to point out. About, pre-2014, Saskatchewan was actually the fourth most competitive jurisdiction in North America. And this actually surprised me, just given how competitive the United States has been over the course of the past 10 years. Recently, I just actually saw a report card that rescored Saskatchewan as the 8th most competitive jurisdiction in North America. So it's come down about four spots, and we've also seen direct and indirect job numbers decline with that. So looking forward, where do we want to go? So this year, CAP is forecasting a 14% increase in the upstream development. And this is the first time that we'll see a clear stabilization in the industry since 2014. So we've seen kind of declining numbers, and we have had bursts of capital investment. But this kind of signifies the first stable year, as we call it, where we're actually seeing a plateau, and we can start forecasting for capital expenditures in the years to come. So this would increase, it would reverse a dramatic decline that started in 2014 when upstream capital investment reached $81 billion, so quite high. Last year, because of COVID-19, the number was around 24 billion. And I like this graph in particular because it shows the wider span. Typically, when you see forecasting like this, you really only see it from 2010 to 2020, but I think that this shows a better story. So, as I said, we're moving, from crisis phase to recovery phase. And in 2020, the crisis contributed to a, 31% decrease in investment, as I mentioned. And so where do we want to go? We want to maintain this contribution to the Canadian GDP, and we feel the industry has a major role to play in Canada's economic recovery. And one thing I want to point out too, and I think this is specific to some of the comments I made about the province's competitiveness, is that when the acute phase of COVID-19 is over, every single jurisdiction in the world will be competing for investment, not just in the oil and gas space, but across sectors. And this is especially the case in the oil and gas sector, as we see companies coming together, acquisitions, that sort of thing. And one interesting thing about the Canadian story is that we're actually quite a bit more nimble than the United States. So when we went through the 2014 or 2015 downturn, our companies really needed to become nimble and be careful about spending, but also, critically looking at workloads, et cetera. Whereas in the US, they've been kind of over investing in the space. And so we've seen companies access much, much more capital from Wall Street than Canadians have from our banks here. And the other component of this too is that from a competitiveness standpoint, the past 5 years, 6 years has been more competitive in the US because they withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement. So all this to say, the spending in the US and kind of the access to resource development will be more challenged. And so this presents a real opportunity for Canada as we're already much further ahead in the climate space. I won't get into this too much. I just wanted to kind of highlight the 3 major projects that were on the books. Of course, Keystone XL has been canceled and will not be moving forward, but the Trans Mountain expansion project as well as the Enbridge Line 3 replacement are both scheduled to be online in the next couple of years. So I just wanted to, I won't get into project details for that, but so what's the opportunity in Saskatchewan? So this is just the province by the numbers. So I had this put together, and I'm happy to actually circulate this presentation out so that you have some of this information. But I did want to highlight that the industry represents 25% of the province's exports, which is valued at about $7.4 billion, and makes up about 16% of Saskatchewan's GDP. And again, I'll share this information with you. So a couple things that we're looking at this year from a policy perspective in the province is that, as I've mentioned, the resource sector is particularly important for the province, and recovery in the sector will be key for the province's fortunes as it looks to foster economic recovery as we emerge from this pandemic. And so this really illustrates the importance of this sector by levels of productivity. So the oil and gas sector yielded more than $2,000 more in real GDP per hour of employment, or 27 times the average contribution to GDP compared to Saskatchewan's business sector overall. So very significant. And so we're really looking to work with the the government of Saskatchewan and looking at their growth plan, which envisions about 100,000 new jobs in the province, as well as significant capital investment. And so we're looking at 3 kind of key areas. One is municipal tax policy, but this is specific to the rural municipal space. We're looking at SaskPower's cost structure. So, we've seen some alleviation in that space over the course of the past year, and we're hoping to see that continue, but working with the government to ensure that that's possible. And then we're also looking for competitive regulatory frameworks. One area that we've been really successful with from the regulatory perspective is methane equivalency, which we've achieved in all 3 of the Western provinces. So as I mentioned, the resource development sector is paying quite a lot more than its fair share of the rural municipal tax load. And this is not just specific to the oil and gas sector, but this is across the natural resources sector. So in municipalities with resource development, the sector makes up about 40% of the property assessment values, but pays 65% of the total municipal tax bill. And then on top of this, the resource development sector also pays tens of millions in additional fees and levies. So what we're looking at this year is really improving rural municipalities' financial transparency. One of the main challenges that we're seeing, which also creates some challenges around making a plan forward, is transparency in this space. It's hard to access information. So, just for an example, in Alberta, there's a registry you can access this data. It's public information, but it's quite challenging to do this in with rural municipalities. So the last point I'll make is that the effective mill rates for the CNI class and RMs with resources are much higher relative to those in other classes. And so what we're looking for is really hoping for a set mill rate of between 0.75 and 2. And this will make investment more equitable because currently it's undermining investment in the province, which we have seen illustrated through various scoring metrics, and some of which I mentioned earlier in this presentation. So I'll leave it there. That was a lot of information, and it looks like I've been talking for just under 18 minutes, so I didn't do too badly. But maybe I'll open it up for questions, if there's anything for me.
Okay, thank you very much, Kelly. That was a great presentation. Any questions from members of council? Councillor Cernick, please.
I just had one question. Is the port of Churchill, Manitoba an option, and is it on the radar screen of CAP or any energy company?
So I think you're likely referring to, well, there were a couple things that were kind of on record for that area. One was a pipeline, but also access to rail and exporting from Churchill from there. Right now, I haven't heard much about that, and certainly it's not a priority for CAP. That doesn't mean that it's not still a viable option. So that's what I would say. I think access to market is very important, and right now from a safety and regulatory perspective, pipelines are the best option. So yeah.
Okay, anything else, Councillor Cernick? No? Okay, Councillor Frank?
Thanks so much for the presentation. Is there a marketing campaign or anything that CAP is doing with a lot of this information to try to get some of this info out to the general public? I know, in an oil town, we know a lot of, we like to know a lot of these facts. It's certainly something we try to preach, but getting that out just so that we're not being beaten up by buzzwords when we hear about green energy and things like that, like you said, with a lot of the coal plants being built around the world and things like that, where we're shutting them down, and particularly in our community. It'd be nice to know that there's somebody out there lobbying, just more people lobbying for us anyways, so.
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, part of my job is to go out and kind of spread this information to the masses. I think within the context, which I've spoken about today, which is the climate context, I think that we need to be careful about how we kind of share the messaging, otherwise it's going to fall on deaf ears. But that being said, some of our policy issues, we do create campaigns around them. I'll just change this slide. We do quite a few campaigns through Canada's Energy Citizens. So we have more than 500,000 members of this now, and please feel free to sign up. I mean, it's a great information for policy updates and whatnot. So this is one avenue for that. The other, which I had up previously, is Context Energy Examined, which I really like context, and I think for municipal government and provincial government, this is any level of government, I should say, this kind of does a deeper dive, and some of the infographics I shared today, you can find them here. In terms of kind of getting to the campaign stage with policy issues, typically we leave that until government is making a decision about something, depending on how conversations has gone and how interested the public is in an issue. So that's kind of how we frame things, but for the most part, my job is just the information only kind of side of things.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Clark, then Councillor Ford.
Thanks, Your Worship. Do you have projections on the number of wells that'll be drilled in Saskatchewan for the next year or two? And is there any issues with labor returning to the oil with a lot of people leaving the industry? Are there any struggles around that?
question. I do have the well forecasts. I just don't have them on me, but I'm happy to email that out. We do drill forecasting every January, and we publish that. So happy to share. I think the number of wells in Saskatchewan was quite a bit under 1,000 this year. In terms of workforce, we've seen some positive metrics around orphan well reclamation and funding from the federal and provincial governments in that space, and service workers in the oil and gas sector have actually been able to maintain employment through that. So we did hear a lot of kind of numbers being thrown around when that announcement came out in the spring, but it has held on to quite a few jobs, which is good news. Other than that, I think from a retention point of view, we're not seeing rapid declines in Saskatchewan the way that we've seen them in Alberta. And I think that's more just kind of the stability of the industry. So yeah, that's hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ford.
Sure, thank you so much. This is going to put you on the spot a little bit since it was only a couple hours ago, but was there anything about the federal budget announcements today regarding like climate funding or anything that surprised you guys or changed your plans in any way so far?
I haven't looked at it in detail. So I don't want to speak kind of in too much depth, but I think in terms of the climate perspective, we kind of know where they want to go. And so the announcements that we're seeing from this point are already things that we're anticipating. I think for us, it's just the concern of balancing that, the investment, but also ensuring that our climate targets are met. But one thing that I will say that we're working with all levels of government with is that because industry is such a large funder of clean tech and innovation, and a lot to do with this is through continuous improvement of existing infrastructure, and so we need capital investment to have this improvement. So that's kind of the point that we're going to continue to make is that we do need investment in the sector to see any massive reductions in GHG emissions.
Okay, any other further questions? Okay, well, thank you again, Kelly. And yeah, the Northwest Passage, as Councillor Cernick said, as that thaws out, we're looking at more and more commodities perhaps going that way. And I agree with you, the pipeline would be the answer. They do have trackage, but it's on muskeg, and to get stable trackage would be a lot of money. But I think the pipeline would be a good option. And I'm sure more and more people will look at that as the passage thaws out, because it is a shorter route to a lot of the markets. Also on the coal side, with Councillor Frank, if they would all do what we do in Estevan and move toward clean coal / carbon capture, India and China would not be in a dilemma. But they don't care about the environment, unfortunately. So I guess the rest of the world will pay the piper for that. Anyway, thank you so much, Kelly, for being here this evening and giving us that great information.
Thank you so much for having me, and please follow up with any questions that you have. I'm always happy to answer.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.
Okay, moving forward under original communications, delegations, and petitions. And I guess I should have asked Kelly if she wanted to stay and watch the council meeting. My bad. Anyway, moving forward, we have under original communications, delegations, and petitions, the GFL CART report for March. Could we have a motion, please, to approve that? Councillor Ford, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Frank. Any further questions or comments? If not, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next, under written reports of committees, we have the Creighton Lodge minutes of January 21st and February 18th. Could we have a motion to accept those, please? Shelley, is your hand up?
Sorry, they got booted off because she was the host.
Oh, they got kicked off. Well, Hopefully they'll come back on. Thank you. Councillor Clark made the motion. Shelley, are you back on?
I am.
Okay, we have the motion. Did you want a second for the Creighton Lodge minutes?
Yes, I will. Sorry, they lost me for a minute there.
Yeah, no problem. Any further questions or comments? Shelley, did you have anything you wanted to say?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next, under written reports of committees, we have the minutes from the Estevan Exhibition Association of March 11th. Do we have a motion for that? Councillor Cernick, seconded by Councillor Frank. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Cernick.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick comment that, they're just like every other organization out there trying to scramble to find a fundraiser and all that stuff. They're thinking of movie nights in the park or movie nights in the field, whatever they want to call it. Obviously, the city concert was supposed to be happening in conjunction with the fair and all that, and everybody's guess is that that is on the back burner for now until any regulations change. Is that kind of where we're sitting?
Yes, City Manager, would you like to elaborate, please?
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Schnick. Yeah, so we have been in talks with the exhibition about trying to potentially hold an outdoor event if the restrictions loosen up by that time. I see in the federal budget today there was some tourism dollars for those outside events, so I know Rod March has been on that to look to see if there was federal funding so we could safely host that type of event. So as we move forward through the vaccination rollout and the restrictions, we'll know more about that, and we'll follow up on today's budget announcement and see if we can make something work with the exhibition.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. Anyone else? Any comments? If not, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next, under written reports of committees, we have the Arts Council minutes of April 7th. Do we have a motion? Thank you, Councillor Ford. Have we got a seconder? Oh, good. Councillor Walliser, thank you for jumping in and saving us on that motion. Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next, under written reports of committees, we have the Estevan Board of Police Commissioners, February 17th minutes. Thank you. Councillor Clark, have we got a seconder? Councillor Cernick, thank you. Okay, thank you, Councillor Groba. Councillor Cernick beat you to the punch by about 2 seconds, but thanks.
No, that's totally fine.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Could you kind of just, more for the public's sake, to just talk about the process to replace the police chief?
Absolutely. We are going through HR, and we're looking at a couple, well, probably 3 headhunters. We haven't picked one yet. That will go to the police board. And then once the headhunters are picked and they get prospective candidates, including locally, if anyone wants to apply, then we will be sitting down and doing interviews, probably by Skype. And it will take an amount of time. It's probably too early to tell. I'm thinking probably a month or so before we're able to find a new candidate, and that will be decided by the police board, and then we'll see how soon the candidate can come, and then we'll have a new chief.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, any other comments? If not, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next, under executive reports, we have from Leisure Services, the washroom facilities.
Rod's on there.
Oh, Rod, did you want to have anything to add to that? Rod's here this evening.
No, Your Worship, I'm here if there are any questions on the report, just ask away.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions or comments from members of council? Okay, I guess not. Rod, you lucked out this evening?
I did, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So do we have a motion to accept the report? Thank you, Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Frank. Any further comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next, under executive reports, we have from the building inspector, the report for March 21. Could we have a motion, please, for that? Councillor Ford. Seconder, Councillor Frank. Oh, there, wait a minute. Councillor Walliser jumped in. Thank you, Councillor Walliser. Any further questions or comments? If not, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next, under introduction of bylaws, we have none. Under public hearings and reports, we have none this evening. Giving notice, I have a proclamation, melanoma and skin cancer awareness for the month of May. Whereas it is imperative that communities across Canada be reminded of the importance of sun safety, and whereas overexposure to UV radiation is one of the major causes of melanoma and non-melanoma skin cancers, and whereas skin cancer is the most common of all cancers. 1 in 6 Canadians born in the 90s will get skin cancer in their lifetimes. Thank goodness I was born decades before that. And whereas many people seek sun without taking the advisable precautionary measures and are unaware that any darkening of skin color, including a tan, is indicative of UV damage. And whereas kin self-examinations should be performed on a monthly basis because skin cancers are highly treatable when detected early. And whereas Save Your Skin Foundation is dedicated to fight against non-melanoma skin cancers, melanoma, and ocular melanoma through nationwide education, advocacy, and awareness initiatives. Be it therefore resolved, I, Roy Ledwig, Mayor of the City of Estevan, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2021 as Melanoma and Skin Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Estevan and ask our citizens to do the same. Could I have a motion, please?
I can make that motion, Your Worship.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Groba. Have we got a seconder? Okay, Councillor Cernick. Any further questions, comments? If not, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Motions from committee, we have none this evening. Consideration of bylaw. Tonight, we would like to give bylaw 2021-2038, Development Appeals Amendment, second and third reading. So basically, City Clerk, the only major changes here under appointment of board members, council shall appoint a maximum of 5 members to the board. And the other one in red, I think it's closer to the end. Wow, this is a wordy document. Under fees, number 2, under fees, council may consider a refund of the appeal fee in whole or in part, where the developer is supported by the development officer in an appeal and the applicant's appeal is successful. So with those changes, we will ask, first of all, for second reading of bylaw 2021-2038. Thank you. Councillor Walliser. Have we got a seconder? Councillor Clark. Any questions at this point? Seeing no hands up, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And last but not least, we will ask for third reading of bylaw 2021-2038 and adoption for use. Do we have a motion? Councillor Frank, thank you. Councillor Ford, seconded. Any further comments? All in favor? Carried, thank you. Next, we'll move to inquiries. Councillor Clark.
Just over the last while, I've noticed both the radio station and the Mercury promoting many of the fundraisers in town, and I just want to, I think they do a great job. I see the Estevan Market Mall has stepped up and is, I know there's a lot of things going on, and they're running an ad promoting that as well. But there was 2 others they were kind of on the personal side, where there was a cleanup promoted by a young person in town, and one to do with access to buildings and stuff like that, there were articles in the paper. And I just want to congratulate all the people that are doing everything at this time. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Clark. We thank our media. They both do a fantastic job, the paper and the radio, at getting things out there, as well as on their social media feeds. We thank you. Councillor Vroba.
You know what? I think for the first time in 4.5 years, I have no inquiries.
Good grief, I feel chest pains. Okay, thank you, Councillor Vroba.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that there. Okay, Councillor Walliser.
No inquiries tonight, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Ford.
I also have nothing this evening.
Okay, quiet night. Councillor Cernick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just had an inquiry about the northern end of town on Morsky Drive. Kind of just to do with weed control and cleanup of construction zones. There's the Estevan dental office is there, and then there's also the future home of condominiums there, which you can't do much about, but it was just more about weed control in the area and a cleanup of the construction area. And they're just kind of wondering, obviously it's developer land, and just is there a limit to where they have to clean this up or look after it or something along that line? So.
Okay, thank you for raising that. And I know the city manager will make sure that Norm and Rod will look after those.
Thank you, Worship Councillor Cernick. So that's still privately held land in there, so we can get bylaw after them. I'm guessing what the site is after the wind took that whole fence away and it makes it look more like a construction zone. So I need to clarify if that was a tri-mount fence or the person owns the property closer to the highway. We kind of thought something would be repaired. I don't know if it's through insurance, but I can look into that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you, city manager. Thank you, Councillor Cernick. Councillor Frank.
Thanks, Your Worship. The only one I had tonight was just, it was kind of a little bit of a statement in the press today, just from the province, that there wouldn't be a drive-through vaccination clinic here. So I just wanted to put my urge out to our provincial friends that as cases are climbing here and that there's been drive-throughs in other areas, that hopefully they'll reconsider and put one here, as I know there's many cases, and we finally for the first time through this whole pandemic, I think we all know some people who have COVID, and we would like to see that end as quickly as possible.
Absolutely, thank you for that. And also off the City Mayor's Caucus, we had recommended to the province to do first responders. We do understand they're going to do that now for fire, police, ambulance, so I think that's a positive development. And also for myself, I'll just go over the clean sweep. May 10th, our crews will clean sweep the north, east, south, and west entrances of the city and outlying areas. May 11th, the City of Estevan crews will be clean sweeping all city-owned properties, including green spaces such as boulevards, medians, parks, and natural areas. May 12th, we'll concentrate on the north. The City of Estevan crews will be helping you clean sweep by picking up your contained organic waste material, twigs, leaves, yard refuse in your front driveway. Branches must be bundled in 3-foot lengths, and leaves and yard refuse must be bagged. All items must be in your driveway before 8 a.m. on May 12th. Callbacks will not happen. See map online at www.estevan.ca, Operation Clean Sweep for boundaries. May 13th, we'll look after the south. City of Estevan crews will be helping you clean sweep by again picking up your contained organic waste, twigs, leaves, and yard refuse in your front driveway. Branches must be bundled in 3-foot lengths. Leaves and yard refuse must be bagged. All items must be in your driveway before 8 a.m. on May 13th. Callbacks will not happen. So, that is it for inquiries. Do we have a motion to move into committee? Okay, thank you. Councillor Frank, seconded by, okay, Councillor Ford. Before I bring the hammer down, I'm remiss. City Manager, I think you had something to say. Anything?
No, nothing.
City Clerk, did you have anything to say?
Not today, Sam.
Wait, City Treasurer, you've been waiting all night. No?
I have nothing, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Just had to make sure of that. Okay. All in favor of adjournment? Thank you. We stand adjourned. Good night.